This is an animation of an asteroid called 16 Psyche, created for me by one of my supporters who goes by the name of Cyclonics, a young man from Australia who is incredibly talented, and I am fortunate to have his assistance. But even though we have a pretty good idea of what this thing's shape is like, its albedo, that sort of thing, it probably doesn't look like this. Now, to be perfectly honest, this artist concept here is probably a little bit fanciful. Over billions of years, 16 Psyche has probably accumulated a great deal of dust and other monotone types of materials that have eliminated some of the colors of the various minerals that are present in this asteroid. But nevertheless, this illustrates just how valuable this thing is. Those gold colors are indeed gold. This might be a more realistic depiction of it, but once again, it's hard to be certain. But one thing we do know is that this asteroid contains more metals, including lots of rare metals, than any other object in the solar system, at least in terms of concentration in one place. And so, sometime next year, NASA is sending a mission simply called Psyche to this mysterious asteroid way out in the asteroid belt. It will make a close approach to Mars, getting a gravity assist from that planet, passing within only 100 kilometers or so of Mars, probably getting some incredible photographs in the process, and then it will make its way towards 16 Psyche. Now, the purpose of this mission is purely scientific. It's going to gather as much information as possible about what NASA suspects is a failed planetary core, very similar to our own core, therefore giving us information about the deep interior of the Earth without actually having to go there, of course, because that would be impossible. But interestingly enough, it's being carried on one of the very few missions being carried by the Falcon Heavy, and this I find to be an interesting coincidence. Because even though Elon has repeatedly said that he doesn't support the idea of asteroid mining and the practicality of such things is just not within our technology these days, at the same time, he's going to gather some very interesting and compelling data about 16 Psyche, because, according to our best estimates, this is how much the rare minerals and metals inside this asteroid are worth. How could we get our hands on these kinds of resources? And if we couldn't, could we exploit nearer asteroids that are also worth a tremendous amount of money? Is it possible with today's technology, perhaps even without Starship? We're going to find all of this out in just a few minutes. Good morning, and welcome to another episode of the Angry Astronaut. Once again, I am traveling. I'm at my father's place. You may recognize the basement environment, and I'm pretty minimalist at this point when it comes to background and such. Please accept my apologies for all of that, but still need to keep the content flowing no matter what I'm doing. So that's what I'm doing right now. And as you might have gathered from the introduction, I'm here to talk to you about asteroid mining, a topic that I've touched on a number of times in the past, and I went into depth, it must have been close to a year ago that I talked about 16 Psyche. It was a pretty successful episode at the time, but I had very few subscribers compared to the number that I have now, and I think that it would be good to bring up this topic again. Perhaps the most valuable asteroid in the solar system, indeed, perhaps the most valuable object of any kind in the solar system, at least if you're talking about rare metals. And I want to kind of collaborate this with the idea of getting asteroid mining going now, not necessarily going to, 16 Psyche, which is all the way out in the asteroid belt, but rather targeting a few profitable asteroids that are near Earth that could be very practical to exploit from here. Now, there's been a lot of debate. This is an extremely controversial topic. Elon Musk himself is not in favor of asteroid mining, something that he doesn't think is going to produce any kind of real profit, at least not currently. Although, interestingly enough, his probe to 16 Psyche, well, not his, of course, NASA's probe, is being sent on its way by a Falcon Heavy, one of the very few uses actually of the Falcon Heavy in recent times, and it's just going to be coming up next year. Now, how is Elon going to react if he discovers that there is indeed, several quintillion dollars worth of resources in this asteroid, including very rare minerals and metals that we are running short of on this planet? Might that change his viewpoint? It's hard to say. The one thing that needs to be emphasized, though, is this is a long game strategy. This is the kind of thing that American companies hate. They want to see a turnaround in 3 years, or they want to see a return on investment in 5 years. Something like this is probably not going to produce a significant return on investment for 10 years. So, you really are playing a long game here. Now, is Elon Musk the only person on the planet who's interested in playing a long game? That's, a question open for debate, because obviously that's something that he's doing with Starlink, which is, very much in the hole right now for the amount of money that he's put into, putting all these satellites into orbit compared to the number of current customers that he has. He's very much in the red. So he's definitely playing a long game on that. And then Mars, well, that's not even, an investment. Mars is more of an investment in the future of the human race. So if we're willing to invest that kind of time and that kind of money and that kind of patience in things like that, then why can't we be just as engaged in investing time and money and patience in doing something that could make the human race rich? Now, there's a lot of arguments against it. There's a huge amount of money up front in terms of investing that sort of thing. And as I said, a lot of time. And, are you going to see a return on your investment in any kind of realistic time frame? Well, that's a tough question, and something that requires a great deal of investigation and study, and something I think that I like to release a lot of videos about. So we're going to cover two topics. We're going to cover 16 Psyche and how best that might be exploited in the future. That's not something we should be going after right now. And also near-Earth objects that are also extremely valuable, extremely worth targeting, and something that we could start going after right now, at least with the preliminary efforts. And we could do it without Starship. And I'm going to explain how all of this is possible right now. Now, as I've mentioned a number of times in the past, it would be a lot easier to exploit 16 Psyche from Mars than it would be from Earth. This is not just because of proximity, but also because of gravity. A Starship operating from Mars would require far less delta V and far less fuel to reach 16 Psyche than anything that we would attempt to launch from Earth. It may be why Elon is so interested in 16 Psyche, or at least appears to be, because this might be a way to make his future Martians extremely rich and to have a vibrant economy. Now, instead of talking about the usual suspects when we're talking about asteroid mining, I'm going to talk about rhodium. Now, a lot of you may not have heard of this, but it's actually very commonly used, even though it's very rare. It can be used to coat optic fibers, crucibles, thermocoupler elements, headlight reflectors. Because it's so resistant to tarnishing, it's used for all kinds of things. It's alloyed with platinum for aircraft turbine engines. It's used in the chemical industry as a catalyst for making of nitric acid, acetic acid, a variety of other things. So many things that rhodium is used for, on top of its most common use, which is in catalytic converters. And guess how much it costs? Now, while I let you digest that figure for a moment, think about how much a full Starship's load would be worth. 100 metric tons would be $83 billion. I mean, holy sh**. There's gotta be some way of getting our hands on all of this. Well, as a matter of fact, there is. And with current technology, and with a lot of mining machines that have already been designed. The problem is, nobody has invested the necessary resources to make it a reality. Now, of course, 16 Psyche is a very long ways away, and logistically it would be a lot more difficult for people on Earth than people on Mars to exploit it. But this is not the only asteroid that has extremely rare metals in it. But getting back to 16 Psyche, assuming that you could get a Starship in parallel orbit with this asteroid, which wouldn't be all that difficult since it takes less delta V to get to this asteroid from Mars than it does from Earth to the Moon, you could quite easily get the Starship there and then begin deploying a wide variety of asteroid mining robots such as this one, which is designed to extract regolith from the Moon. However, although this digging machine would work just fine on Mars, it would have a hard time on 16 Psyche because of the incredibly low gravity. However, if you tethered the machine to the surface of the asteroid before you started the digging process, it probably wouldn't be all that difficult to make a modified version of this digging robot work. And then once it loads up its cargo, it takes the regolith and other materials back to a processor to sift out the less desirable metals and isolate things like rhodium. Now, there are, of course, all kinds of asteroid digging machines in the works, but the reason why I like this one is it picks up very small scoops from the surface in order to make up for the low gravity, and on top of that, it can flip itself over, in other words, take care of any unforeseen problems, whereas a robot like this, which I also like because it handles both the mining and the processing all in one, still would have a difficult time handling any sort of unforeseen problems. It kind of works in one specific way, and if it bounced or something along those lines, it would create a serious issue. But my point is, a wide variety of asteroid mining robots and machines have already been designed, and some of them have even been produced, at least in terms of prototypes, and they come in all different shapes and sizes. Some of them dig, some of them simply scoop up the regolith, which may be all that's necessary, especially on a metal-rich asteroid where the very regolith may be made out of things like rhodium, platinum, palladium, and all kinds of other valuable substances. Once you have the ore gathered, getting it to the Starship is actually kind of embarrassingly easy. The asteroid has virtually no gravity, so you could use ion engines or a variety of other low-thrust engine solutions to get the ore all the way to the Starship and just simply put it into the fairing. and then the Starship makes its way back to Earth, again using very little delta V because it doesn't have any real gravity to escape. And upon arriving in Earth orbit, it would not even have to discharge its cargo. It could just simply land on the surface of the planet with an enormous amount of cargo in place. So that's the magic of the Starship. But is it something that could be done without it? Okay, SpaceX fans, I know you are sick of seeing this thing and you're wondering why I'm so in love with it, but there's a very particular reason. The Vulcan Centaur is the only rocket on the books right now, aside from the Starship, that is designed to have a reusable second stage. Now, this is going to make Vulcan extremely useful. The beginning Vulcans are not going to have this, but the improved second stage, which is going to be introduced in the next couple of years, is going to have 4 times the payload capacity, a lot more thrust, simply because it's going to have a lot more RL-10 engines from Aerojet Rocketdyne, and also, the most important thing is its ability to act as a reusable space tug once it gets into orbit. And as you can see here, its capability is far beyond that of anything that ULA has used up to this point. Plus, it has some very innovative features, such as its ability to use fuel for electric power, and also for multiple restarts. So how could you use this thing for asteroid mining in the near future? Well, let's say that you launch a Vulcan Centaur with its advanced second stage. It used to be called ACES, by the way, but the principle is essentially the same, to take 27 metric tons worth of mining equipment, mining robots, etc. up to low Earth orbit. At that point, you're out of fuel. But guess what? This stage is designed to be used again and again. As a matter of fact, indefinitely, as you can see here. So you just have to refuel it. Does that sound familiar? Well, ULA has had this idea for a long time. So you send up another Vulcan to refuel the second stage so that it can carry that 27 tons worth of mining equipment all the way to the near-Earth object asteroid. And if you blinked, you might have missed it. ULA has obviously been thinking about commercial asteroid mining for a long time. It's one of the primary purposes of this advanced second stage. Use it as a tug to take the necessary equipment out to the asteroid, and the very same tug brings back the ore. You don't have to make launch after launch after launch of expendable rockets in order to make asteroid mining possible the way it was in the past. And by the way, what you're looking at right here is ULA's concepts of using the advanced second stage to carry fuel depots instead of cargo and ore, but nevertheless, the principle is the same. You can use this second stage to carry just about anything you want from anywhere in the solar system back to Earth, preferably from a near-Earth object asteroid that requires a very low delta V to reach, and many of them can be reached with less delta V than the Moon, and then bring it back to Earth orbit. So let's put this into practice. The Vulcan Centaur launches from Cape Canaveral with its advanced second stage on board. Once it reaches low Earth orbit, it refuels and then makes its way to a near-Earth asteroid. It then deposits 27 metric tons worth of equipment down on the surface of the asteroid. And by the way, this isn't just some artist's conception of some made-up machine. This is actually a concept vehicle that was created by engineers, and a scaled-down working version of it exists. A lot of the research and development for asteroid mining has already been done. So of course, then the ore gets sifted and the most valuable metals identified to be transferred back to the tug. If you've identified the right asteroid, then just about all of the regolith and materials you gather are going to be valuable metals. Once this is done, then the tug returns to low Earth orbit, where the payload is dropped off. Now, assuming you don't have a fuel depot in orbit yet, then another Vulcan second stage has to make its way back up to orbit in order to handle the refuel. And here, the process is described in greater detail. You've got your first launch and your second launch handling the refueling, and it kind of illustrates the refueling process right here. Again, very similar to SpaceX. But how do you get it down to Earth? Well, with something called a hypersonic inflatable aerodynamic decelerator, essentially the same thing that ULA is planning to use for their engines. So you break the ore or the metals up into small enough packages to fit inside these containers and send it down to Earth's surface without them burning up at all. And then once they get down to an appropriate altitude, they deploy parachutes and get retrieved by parafoil. Now, of course, it would have to be broken down to a manageable size, but nevertheless, it wouldn't be terribly difficult and could be done by robot or by astronauts in orbit for that particular job. So let's assume that you need 4 launches of the Vulcan Centaur to achieve all of this. You probably don't, but let's say that you do. On top of that, let's say it takes $2 billion to design and deploy the equipment. So you're looking at $2.4 billion for the entire operation. And if you brought back the full capacity of the Vulcan Centaur in valuable metallic ore, the value of said cargo would be $10,800,000,000. Now, there are ways to make this process even less expensive. For example, you could deploy what's called a gravity tractor, just using the mass of a space probe to re-divert the path of an asteroid to where it's paralleling the path of the asteroid that you're trying to mine. So it would provide you with a good source of in situ fuel, assuming that it was a C-class asteroid, which is full of water, ice, hydrogen, etc., thus making it even less expensive to refuel your tug and allow you to retrieve the ore even faster. And if you're one of those naysayers that claims that, well, if you just get a whole bunch of valuable metals, it's just going to reduce the value of the metal, making the whole exercise valueless, well, this is what I've got to say to that. Yes, it'll work that way if you do it like an idiot. However, if you just release the metals at a very controlled pace in the same way that OPEC handles things, you'll make yourself very rich, just like them. Now, can the Starship handle all of this better? Yes. And would it make people a whole lot richer to use the Starship instead of the Vulcan Centaur second stage, as I've talked about? Yes. But do we have to wait for the Starship to become operational before we start exploiting these asteroids? No, definitely not. And in my opinion, once Elon gets a look at just how valuable 16 Psyche really is, his opinion about asteroid mining may change radically. It is going to take a billionaire with a vision or a country with wealth that's willing to take this risk in order to be able to exploit these resources. It's going to take one of the two. But the thing that really pisses me off is the fact that we do have billionaires on this planet that could do something like this. And there are more benefits involved in asteroid mining besides just the resources involved. There's, of course, a great deal of scientific knowledge that we can gain from exploring these asteroids that we've really done very little work on thus far. There's so many things that we don't know about these objects, and a lot to be learned. But aside from that, there's also, of course, the danger of collision, the danger of some sort of incident with a smaller near-Earth object, or a comet for that matter, and Earth. And it's going to happen. It's going to happen eventually. And And if you can mine an asteroid, or if you can divert asteroids, as I suggested in the video, to be more exploitable, either, drawing C-class asteroids closer to a mineral-rich asteroid, if that's what you want to exploit, or just exploiting a C-class asteroid, which is even easier because all of the water and the fuel, the in situ resources are already there. But if you are able to do things like that, then you're going to be able to divert asteroids that are dangerous to this planet off their course. And that is extremely important to the future of human civilization. I don't care how long it's been since there's been a major incident. I mean, remember, it was just over 100 years ago that Tunguska happened. And yeah, it happened in the middle of Siberia, which is why history doesn't record it as a major cataclysm. If it had struck London or New York, that's something that people would still be talking about today. And the governments of Earth would be way more focused on protecting us from things like that in the future. So if we can, do two things in one here, if we can, make ourselves rich, whatever companies want to get engaged in this, or governments or whatever, and at the same time secure the future of the human species, why not do it? Why the hell haven't we done it? Now, everybody talks about the cost per kilogram. Well, that's dropping all the time, and we don't need to wait for Starship, as I pointed out in the video. There are rockets either available or becoming available that could make this possible. Now, granted, they're not going to be as cheap as Starship in terms of cost per kilogram, but at the same time, if you consider the potential wealth involved, they're certainly affordable. It's certainly doable. We just haven't done it. Nobody's willing to take the risk. No one's willing to make the investment. And that, frankly, pisses me off. We need to take that leap of faith. Somebody needs to take that leap of faith, because whoever that somebody is, if they do it right, and if they plan it out in advance and are patient about the results, they are going to become insanely rich. And they're going to be able to make a massive difference to the future of this planet in whatever way that they want to. If they want to invest in various things that will improve the lives of people on this planet, a trillionaire could do it very easily. Now, of course, everybody's, I mentioned this in the video, but I'm going to re-emphasize it. Oh, if you bring back a bunch of, valuable minerals, then they won't be valuable anymore. Well, that could be the case with anything of value. Look at OPEC. If they dumped all of their oil revenues onto the market all at once, then yeah, they would lose a ton of money too. They'd probably go bankrupt, but that's not what they do. They control the release of valuable resources bit by bit in order to make themselves rich. You can do the same thing with asteroid mining, and it's something that we absolutely need to be doing. So, I've gotten over my rant now. I hope you enjoy what I do. If you do, it's all in the description. You can support me. Perhaps get my merch, such as this one, the Mars Phobos Mars Base 1. That's one of my personal favorites, but in any event, lots of ways to support this channel if you enjoy what I do. So until we actually have somebody who's ready to take that leap of faith, who's ready to invest in the future of mankind and in asteroid mining and all the insane wealth and benefit that it can bring, until all of that comes to pass, I urge all of you to stay angry about space.